Live. I'm Chef AJ, your host, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people just like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today's guest is Dr. Ben Brown, and I actually met him a few years ago when I was a guest presenter at Rancho La Puerta, and it was very fortuitous because so was he. I had no idea at the time who he was or that he knew Dr. Anthony Lim, who was a recent guest on the show, or that he had known Dr. Dean Ornish and worked with him for over 20 years. He's an amazing presenter, and I know you're going to love his presentation. Please welcome Dr. Ben Brown. Thank you so much. You've been on my radar, and it took 2 years for us to connect.
Oh, this is beautiful. Thank you, AJ. And just really appreciate all that you're doing and what you're introducing people in the world to. It's a really beautiful world of wellness out there. And what we'll be talking about today is the global wellness revolution. It's really simple because these are things we have control over. And these days where there's so much that we don't have control over, it's nice to start to exercise our control in a few simple areas of our life. So what we'll be focusing on today is two things. One is the Miracle Morning Flow, which is a way that you can take charge of your mornings. Simple way to create some structure. Again, a lot of people who aren't working are feeling like they don't have the structure they used to have. And then there's a lot of people that are very interested in wellness that are still working that have lost control of their time. And this is a way for them to regain some control of their time. This is part of a program that I put together called Global Wellness. The idea with global wellness is that which is good for us is also good for the planet. That which is good for the planet is also good for us. So there's this nice circle that happens. Should I start sharing my screen now, AJ?
Absolutely. Thank you. And guys, please check out Dr. Brown's website. It's his name, benbrownmd.com. I'm on his mailing list. He sends out incredible emails, and I know it's the ones you'll really enjoy.
Great. Now, is that coming through well?
Yes.
Okay, great. So really the global wellness revolution is about a journey, and it's about your journey and your journey to wellness. I'm going to take you back in time a bit to my journey. And we're going to go back actually even before, this slide starts in 1994, but even before that, when I was in medical school at University of California, San Francisco, I got very interested. I went into medical school. We didn't have anyone that was medical in my family. And I thought I was going to learn all about wellness in med school. Surprise! That didn't happen. And I remember going to my first lecture on nutrition. We had 4 lectures on nutrition, which was about 4 more than most other medical schools. And so I went to that first lecture just so excited, and it was all about the American Diabetes Association diet. And I thought, well, this doesn't apply to me, and the evidence doesn't look like it really helps diabetes much. So I went to the next lecture on nutrition, and the next lecture on nutrition was the American Heart Association diet, which also didn't have much evidence that said that it helped people with heart disease. It didn't apply to me because I didn't have heart disease. And then the next 2 lectures were on total parenteral nutrition, which is when people can't eat by mouth and you have to give them their food by vein. So needless to say, I was miserably disappointed by those 4 lectures on nutrition, and started to look around for who else is doing work on nutrition, who else was doing work on lifestyle. Every illness that I saw came back to lifestyle. If you follow this lifestyle, then you won't get this illness. And nobody was doing any work on lifestyle in my whole med school. I went to the Department of Internal Medicine, Department of Family Medicine, and then Department of Psychology to find anyone that was studying lifestyle, and they weren't. So I left med school, finished med school, which was a great thing. I'd been doing a lot of international work, mostly along the Thai-Burma border. And my mom handed me a set of videos by Bill Moyer called Healing in the Mind. And at this time, I'm a resident. I'm in my last 2 years of residency. And in there is a section on Dean Ornish and the work that he's doing, the research that he was doing with people with heart disease. And I was like, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for. And so I literally cold called him the next day. And at that time, I could actually get through to Dean, which was pretty remarkable. And so we chatted and just hit it off. He loved the work that I was doing internationally, and I started working with him at his next retreat. And since then, we've been really dear friends. And over the years, been working together on various projects, different research projects. And now we're working together to roll out the program nationally. And I'm the medical director of the Ornish Lifestyle Medicine program. When you see those things, when you have those feelings, follow the journey. And so this is about your journey. How do you close the gap between your best self, the best self that you can imagine yourself being, and who you're currently being, which may be close to that or maybe really far away from that. And it's a journey of climbing a mountain. It's a journey where knowing is really not enough. We have to make changes in our lifestyle. We have to make changes in our daily routine. And I know that's what AJ talks about. And I doubt that's a surprise to anyone that's on listening to this right now. And really, I want to start by saying, you know, we've all made mistakes, right? You know, it's not about our mistakes. It's about the lessons that we've learned. And you know, I'm human as well. I make mistakes on a daily basis, but what do I learn from that? And it's not really about where you are even. It's about what's the direction that you're heading. And so one powerful way to start every day out, pointed in a very powerful direction, is a thing I call the Miracle Morning Flow. And this is 7 simple steps that you can do to win every day. Now, the first of these, which is to do these before you look at your cell phone. And my strong recommendation is that if you are using your cell phone as an alarm, that you get a different alarm. So that's before we even get started with the Miracle Morning Flow. What happens when you look at your phone is you start focusing on other people's priorities, right? You look at it and then all of a sudden you're lost either in social media, or you're lost in the text that you got since you went to sleep, or you know, there's some little crisis that you have to deal with. So don't look at your phone until you deal with your own wellness, till you deal with what it is that you need, and then you're ready to deal with other people's needs. So the acronym for this is Fill Me Up, and Fill has a PH. So the first one of those is purpose. So purpose, what you do even when you're lying in bed is you can just take a deep breath in and connect in with the deepest part of yourself. Remember what your purpose is. If this is really clear to you, then just bring up that image. Some people make vision boards, other people have statements, mission statements, or some people, you know, their purpose in life is really about holding something as precious or sacred. And then you can bow to whatever that is that's precious and sacred, and give some thanks for another day. And I always like to ask for support that I can be the best Ben that I can be. Learned that one from Wavy Gravy. I like that. And then the second one is to hydrate. You know, after you get up, you owe it to yourself. You haven't had any water. I think I'll hydrate right now as an example. You haven't had any water for a while, go ahead and hydrate, take a little bit of drink of water, handle the basic essentials. You can let go of water now. And this is when I often make my bed. I like to start off my day with a made bed, but you may not. So that's the purpose, and then hydrate. And then the third one is invigorate. And this is where doing some simple movement. Now, I like to do the 5 Tibetans. Other people like to do, sometimes I'll do 3 sun salutes. Sometimes I'll do a thing called the nitric oxide dump. These are all different movements, short movement things that get me started off in the right direction. Now, I want to say that you don't have to do all 7 of these. If you're thinking, oh, I'm at 3 and I'm already overwhelmed, you know, just do the first 1 or the first 2 or the first 3. But this is just a nice flow that you can go through on a daily basis. And you may start out with 1 of them, you may start off with 2, you may start off with 3, or you may start off with all 7. The next one is listening and listing. And this one is where you get a chance to write down whatever is on your mind or things that you have to do today to get them out of the way. So you don't have to have them on your mind anymore. Just a nice way to clear everything so that when you go into the next step, which is the 5th step, meditation, that you can have a clear mind. And so the 5th step is meditating. For beginners, I usually recommend something very, very simple, something like taking 3 deep cleansing breaths. And I like to inhale like I'm inhaling green healing light, and picture that green healing light going out to every single cell. And then I exhale, and I exhale whatever it is that doesn't belong anymore, that doesn't fit anymore. 3 of those breaths, and that's the simplest meditation. And even just 3 simple breaths like that puts us in a different state, and that we can move on to our day in that different state. It actually adjusts our sympathetic nervous system, just those 3 simple breaths. And if you already have a meditation that you like, that's great. In my course, I teach a 5 steps meditation, which is a longer meditation that has multiple parts to it. And then energize. What is it that energizes you? For some people, this is doing a 10 minutes of a hobby. For other people, it's getting up and dancing. For some people, they're jogging in place, they're putting on music or maybe playing music. What is it that you want to fit in here? This is kind of like a free space. Put in whatever it is that you're passionate about right here. And then the final one is really just where do you put your focus? And the idea here is to focus up. Be positive. Think about moving into your day. Celebrate all these little micro wins. And I call these micro wins because you can literally do the 7 steps in 7 minutes. And so if you're doing that in 7 minutes, that's not a lot of any one of these things, but all of those are little micro wins. And I like to think of those as votes for my identity. These are votes for my true identity versus votes for something that I don't want to be, right? And when we're putting stuff in our mouth, I know AJ focuses on food a lot. A lot of times we can vote for identity by what we put in our mouth. You know, if your identity is somebody that's strong and healthy, you're going to be putting things that are going to make you strong and healthy in your mouth. And finally, yes, today is going to be a great day. Today is a great day. It's already started off on a great day. I'm sitting here chatting with you, and I've just gotten a chance to connect with somebody that I care about deeply that I met at Rancho La Puerta. She'll recognize this next picture. We're going to be moving it now into the next section. And I want to say that if you have any questions about that miracle morning flow, please hop on my website, benbrownmd.com, and you just go to the connect page, that last page, and send me an email. You can send me questions about this. I can also send these out to you, put you on our email list, send you out that little infographic. So all of that can happen through that website. And on that site, you'll also see that I have a lot of patient handouts on there. There's a link to the blog on there. And so all of those are things that you can have access to. So I'm going to pause for just a second as we go from the miracle morning flow into some of the really powerful research here on healing the heart. Now, I mentioned that I've been working with Dean for over 20 years. And in this, I've seen some amazing transformations. I'm going to talk first about some of those amazing transformations that I've seen, because this is a program that has the potential to literally change the way that medicine is practiced right now. So we'll go into the details of the program, and we'll go into some of the research. And I'm not able to see the chat, but I know AJ's really good at sort of pulling up the chat. And so that, you know, during this program, if there's a burning question, that's great. Go ahead and chat it in. If we don't get to it, then I'm sure AJ will ask me after we're done with most of this presentation. So with that, we'll move right in. And this is Liz. So Liz is somebody that I met when I was in Indiana giving a presentation who'd gone through the program. Liz is in her mid-50s. She's had 5 heart attacks. She has 8 stents. Can you imagine? Some of you may have similar stories. She has a really bad history of heart disease, and her doctors have basically said, you know, there's not anything more that we can do for you. You know, and so she was sitting on her couch just waiting to die, watching TV and waiting to die. Not a very hopeful place to be. You can imagine when the Ornish program opened there and she went through it, she went from not even being able to walk around her block to being able to walk down to the store with a backpack and come back with food several miles. And this happened over the course of 9 weeks. These changes happened fast. And you can imagine that here she was, you know, waiting to die. And now she's in a position of planning her future because she thinks she's going to have a future now. She thought she was linked to her destiny because her parents both died of heart attacks in their 50s. She thought for sure that's what's going to happen to me. And it almost did. Right. And it would have had she not found a program that could help her with lifestyle where, you know, medicines and the other surgical techniques couldn't help. This is James. James is 49. When he first came into the program, he weighed 365 pounds. And in just 14 months, he dropped down to his ideal weight of 195 pounds. His body fat went from 58% to about 10%. And waistline went from 58 to 32. You know, he couldn't even button up his shirt, and it was a size 60. And you know, now he's down to a 42 size suit, and it's an athletic cut. Looks great, feels great, has done just amazing with this program. And you know, again, simple changes. He feels better than ever. Now he's able to play sports. He adopted a kid. He's keeping up with his little boy, and he can do things that he didn't dream of just a couple of years before. I just got back from Yosemite, did a backpacking trip with my daughter, which incidentally, getting out in nature is a great thing to do during COVID. We barely saw another soul out there. And so it was incredibly gorgeous, as you can see here. So where are we at as far as lifestyle medicine goes? And I'm going to go through some of the things that are known and also some of the questions that are still out there. I like what Michael Pollan says about nutrition science. He says, you know, nutrition science is about where surgery was in 1650, showing a lot of promise, but, you know, do you really want to get surgery in 1650? This is one of those areas that kind of drives everybody a little bit crazy, because where evidence is thin, opinion is thick. And so whatever you're looking for out there in medicine, it's a little bit like you can find a few studies that support almost anything. You know, fats are good, fats are bad. And the most powerful way that people get famous is by telling you, oh, what that other person is saying is wrong, right? You know, the controversy drives the book sales. And so everyone's coming out saying, oh, you know, plants are bad, you know, plants are good. It's maddening. I want to go into some of the real solid research that we've done at the Ornish program so that you can have an idea of how powerful plant-based medicine really is. And what we've learned that plant-based medicine and the 4 parts of the Ornish program are really powerful. These ancient techniques, we had to use modern science to prove that these are actually helpful. And I also want to say that we have a certain amount of humility. We realize that there is no one answer, there is no one way. There are many things that probably lead to health. And although we're talking about nutrition, nutrition for somebody may not even be the most important part of their health program. It may be more stress management, or for them, maybe it's getting sleep, or maybe it's being in a loving relationship, or just having connection with friends. If you look at social support, you can decrease your mortality 10 times by increasing social support between the people that are at the least amount of social support and those that are at the most. Again, staying in touch with people during this time of COVID is really, really important. So here's the 4 parts of the program: nutrition, stress management, moderate exercise, and group support. Another way to say that is eating well, stressing less, loving more, and moving more. And what we're talking about here is where we're using lifestyle medicine, which we all know is useful for prevention, but we're using lifestyle medicine now as treatment. These are people that have gotten a diagnosis. They've had a heart attack, they've had a blockage, they have angina. And what happens when we use lifestyle as treatment, right? Not drugs and surgery. And we're going to be talking about the data. The question I've been asking is simple the new powerful, right? And I think the answer is yes. It's because what we're doing is we're going towards the cause. And the cause is a very simple formula. Number 1, you stop doing what makes you sick. Duh, right? Stop stressing so much. Stop being so isolated. Stop being sedentary. Stop eating the junk that is causing clogging of your arteries. And you start doing what makes you well. And this means, you know, the plant-based diet or an anti-inflammatory diet, starting to move, a gradual amount of movement. Learning how to connect with others, you know, which for people with heart disease has been incredibly powerful. Some of the most powerful stuff comes from that, and learning how to relax, and not meaning that you have to stop everything that you're doing. You just have to balance it with relaxation. So we're going to go way, way back in time, back to 1978. And this is when there was a young medical student in Texas who decided he would do something crazy. And he put 10 people in a hotel for a month and did the state-of-the-art test at that time, which was a thallium scan. And I'm going to use my pointer here, and I'm hoping that you can see that as it comes up. In this thallium scan, what you see here is this white is good blood flow. This is actually blood flow back into the lungs. And this part here, this black, is where no blood flow is getting into. And you can see literally a month later, that same patient is getting blood flow into this area of the heart, and there's much less blood that's backed up into the lungs. Why? Why did that happen? Because we went and turned off the tap. Stop doing what makes you sick, start doing what'll make you well. Well, you can imagine this information coming from a medical student was met with uproarious yes, right? No, that's actually not. They were like, well, you didn't have a control group. You know, have you ever seen this? No, you know. So they thought this was impossible. They thought this was some research fluke and didn't believe it. So the next study was done, and this was done in the early 80s. And this was where they looked at people in their response to exercise. Before people went through the program, everybody's blood pressure went down with exercise. What's supposed to happen is that your blood pressure and your ejection fraction is supposed to go up when you exercise. That's the amount of blood that your heart pumps, right? You can imagine you have more demand, but if you have a very sick heart, when you ask for more demand, it doesn't give you more, it gives you less because the heart is so stressed. Well, same experiment, people at this time with a control group, and the control group stayed like they were. They didn't get any better, but the experimental group had an amazing change in their ejection fraction. And now this program is actually covered for people with congestive heart failure, which I'll get into in a while. But these are people that had congestive heart failure. And surprisingly, in all of our studies, we saw that angina decreased 91% in just 24 days. And what does that look like? So this is a guy named Werner Havenstraat. Werner came into our program in his 60s, and he had such a massive heart attack that he couldn't actually make it across the street. He used to get really angry at the little man that would change colors. Is that little man? So he couldn't make it across the street without that light changing. Well, Werner went in this program, and he's German, and he followed it very rigidly. And Werner, after almost dying in his 60s, not being able to cross the street, was hiking in the Alps in his 90s, going on cruise ships, and he played the harmonica and would tell stories. Werner passed away just a few years ago at 99. So again, amazing. And he's just another example of how powerful this program can be. That still wasn't enough to convince people. So we did the definitive trial. This was the lifestyle heart trial. 48 people, moderate to severe heart disease, randomly assigned. And we used very detailed tests. We used state-of-the-art tests, which are still, incidentally, state-of-the-art tests, the quantitative coronary arteriography, PET scans, and events. And here's what we saw. So if you look at the difference between this and this, you can see that the heart disease, that blockage, literally reversed. Now, if anyone knows physics, flow is a fourth power of radius. So if you don't, sorry to bother you with some math, but what ended up happening is with that a little bit of change, we had a 400% increase in blood flow. Now here, this blue and black is no blood flow, and this orange is high blood flow. And you can see what they thought was that this was dead myocardium in the past. What they found out was it was actually just stunned myocardium, that you could get blood flow, and that much of this myocardium that they previously thought was dead, that's heart muscle, would come back to life. Pretty miraculous. And what we saw is that 99% of the people on our program reversed or stopped their progression. And only 5% of those in the control, and 45% had worsening. So this is what I mentioned. There was 300 to 400% improvement in coronary blood flow measured by cardiac PET scan. And we saw that people got better at 1 year. And this was what was considered the natural progression of heart disease, where people got worse at 1 year and then just continued to get worse and worse. We found that's not natural at all, that if you make the changes, you get better at 1 year, and you get even better at 5 years. And this is looking at the percent stenosis. This was strongly correlated with the people that followed the program, in that if people didn't follow the program, they didn't get better. Big surprise, right? People that were intermediate stabilized their heart disease. People that followed it highly reversed their heart disease. This is pretty powerful medicine. You do not see graphs that look like this very often in medicine, where there's this huge difference between the treatment and control group. This is a little bit like the graphs would look like when penicillin first came out to treat pneumonia. So again, statins, none of the people in our experimental group were put on statins. This was when statins first came out. About half of the people in the control group were put on statins. It did slow progression, but it did not lead to reversal. And in fact, one of the myths that I heard was that you can't lower LDL cholesterol very much with diet alone. We found that you can actually lower it about 40% with diet alone in the first year without any cholesterol lowering drugs. And that's about the same as you can lower it with some of the statins. And most dramatically, there were 2.5 times less cardiac events in the Ornish Lifestyle group than in the control group. Here's a beautiful slide from our backpacking trip. We also went kayaking out on Lake Tenaya. If any of you know the area, that's an amazing lake. I'm going to take a little sip of water and then we'll go into a few more studies. So I hope you're getting the idea that there's data, that this is not just opinion, that these are not just, oh, I think it's a good idea. There's data. This is in fact the only program that's been shown to reverse heart disease. So, the question then became, okay, yeah, this was a study that was done in California, but can you do it in the rest of the United States? So we did it in 24 different sites, including Pennsylvania, Nebraska, and West Virginia. West Virginia, #1 for heart disease. Yeah, we're #1. And we found that people in those states could, in fact, do this. They showed the same changes that we saw at 12 weeks that we saw in our original study group, and the same changes at 1 year. And we saw the same changes in their LDL, triglyceride, and all of the different things that we were measuring. And most importantly for the insurers, we saw a 4-fold reduction in claims in those that had greater than 25,000 the previous year. And for every dollar they invested, they estimated that they saved 3. So here's some flowers from Rancho La Puerta. Some of the other things, can this actually help with people that have diabetes? Maybe you don't have heart disease. Maybe you just have some of the risk factors. It helps with diabetes and the other risk factors of heart disease, as you'll see. And in fact, this is a huge problem. About half of Americans have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and that's actually increased since this slide was made. Lifestyle has already been shown to be better at preventing diabetes than drugs. This was a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine where they compared lifestyle, not even as strict of changes as what many of the programs recommend. And they compared that to the medicine, metformin and placebo, and we could see that lifestyle beat them all. We know that complications of diabetes go down dramatically the more you decrease your A1C with lifestyle, not so much the more you increase your A1C with meds. But with lifestyle, if you get it below 7, almost all of the complications of diabetes are stopped and reversed. And what we found in our program was that we were able to decrease people to less than 7 at 12 weeks and keep them there. Weight loss. Now, this wasn't designed as a weight loss program, but what we found is that our program did better than Weight Watchers. We weren't even designing it, and we found that people lost, an average of over 13 pounds at 12 weeks and almost 16 pounds at a year compared to Weight Watchers, which was about 11 pounds at a year. So, and here's just some of the way that looks graphically. It just comes off, weight just comes off. And what does 10 pounds of fat look like? This is a little bit of a gross slide. Sorry, trigger warning if you, but this is what 10 pounds of fat looks like. I was kind of surprised by that, right? When we think about, dropping 10 pounds, that's what you're dropping. Couple of more slides from this backpack trip. Just stupendous. I love granite. And this is from Lake Tenaya. What about prostate cancer? We found people's PSAs decreased, people's tumor size decreased. This is where we were looking at with MR spectroscopy, and you can actually see a literal shrinking of the tumor on MR spectroscopy. So this was, I'm just going to run through some data, this was after a fire down at Rancho La Puerta. What about genetic expression? So 501 genes beneficially affected at only 3 months. Here's a heat map showing 48 genes that were upregulated and 553 that were downregulated. And the ones that were downregulated were in this family of genes called the RAS oncogenes. These are the ones that are responsible for prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. And so, our genes are modifiable by lifestyle. What about our age? Now, telomeres are this thing that's at the end of our DNA that is correlated with our age. We found that the enzyme that controls that was increased by 30% at only 3 months, and that telomeres actually lengthened, right? This is powerful data. Nothing else has been shown to lengthen telomeres in this way. And this is lifestyle, right? If this was a drug, it'd be $1 billion drug. You know, and look at the p-values. If you're a researcher, you know, that's a huge thing. This is not happening by chance. And this says birthdays are good for your health. Studies have shown that people have more birthdays live longer. So our genes are really not our fate. And that's the powerful news here, that if you have a family history of something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are stuck with this. Like Liz, that woman we talked about earlier. Now we're going to move into another area, depression. And this has been one of the more surprising things for me in this, is, you know, how does this program affect people with depression? And we know that depression is strongly linked with events. If you look at people that are depressed and their mortality 6 months after having a heart attack, if you're depressed, you can see from this graph that your risk of having a heart attack goes up more than doubles, almost triples. So depression is hugely important for heart disease, but hugely important for quality of life as well. In all our participants, depression scores drop by half and it stays down. And this is one slide that shows our national data, where we're looking at 7,000 people. And you can see, we see these same decreases in our depression scores. It drops by about half. Hugely powerful data. And how do we do this? We do this simply by stop doing what is making us sick, start doing what will make us well. And these simple 4 parts of the program that our bodies want to heal. They want to help us get well, and they can do so quickly. Here's a police officer that had a 30 to 40% blockage that all but disappeared after just 5 weeks on the program. Right? This has been looked at by multiple cardiologists, and they have seen that this was not just a vasospasm. This was an actual plaque that reversed in 5 weeks on the program. And he had a repeat angiogram because he had had some issues, some gastrointestinal issues, and he thought it might be a heart issue. And so he went back into the program just 5 weeks later. Back in to get that study just 5 weeks later. And people do change. Some real dramatic results. This guy was on a heart transplant list. In just 9 weeks after starting on the program, they suspended his heart transplant. He had a heart that just wasn't beating very well, and it had such bad disease, and the heart muscle changed and got stronger. We've got over a dozen people that have come off the heart transplant list, and at $1 million a pop, that's huge, right? So Dave, this guy Dave was retired Navy, 57 years old, and he had just adopted this new baby. When he was told he needed a heart transplant, he feels like he's been given a new lease on life. Again, people make changes. And the Ornish lifestyle is comparatively, I'll show a slide here in just a little bit about, people think taking medicines is easy and, all these lifestyle changes are so hard. Our adherence in almost 4,000 people was 85 to 90% that 1 year. So and we're not asking people to do light stuff. We're asking people to do 3 hours a week of exercise, 1 hour a day of stress management, eat a plant-based diet that has no added fat, and to go to community or group support meetings once to twice a week, usually once a week. And so we have an average of 87%. Look at the adherence of just taking a statin medicine. These are the people that actually fill the prescription. And if you look 3 months later, if you look 3 months later, about half the people are taking these medicines. If you look a year later, only a third of the people are taking these medicines. This data is the same if you look at people that are taking triple or quadruple therapy a year after a heart attack, even people that have had a heart attack. This is for prevention. The people that are on triple and quadruple therapy, which has been shown to be helpful for people that have had a heart attack, if you look a year later, they're not taking it. And why? It comes down to a lot of issues, but one of the biggies is that there's no point in giving something up you enjoy unless you're going to get something back that's even better. And people don't like to be reminded that they have a disease every day, but if they're pointed in that right direction, remember what I said in the beginning, that people that are pointed in the right direction, wellness is about pointing yourself in the right direction. It's not about the mistakes you've made. It's about what are the lessons you've learned. It's not about where you are, but what direction are you pointing? And when you're doing lifestyle changes, you're pointing in a very different direction. Your body feels that, your mind feels that, your emotions feel that, and you are encouraged to keep going. You're constantly taking those positive votes for who you want to become, who you want to be. Now, Medicare, it took us 16 years, but Medicare did finally in 2011 create a new benefit category called intensive cardiac rehab. And the Ornish program is the first lifestyle program that was ever approved for treatment of heart disease. So you can get this covered by insurance if you have a program in your area. I do want to let you know that vegetarianism does have some side effects. And this one I love. You know, this is a doctor talking to a child. Stop eating so many vegetables. I can't seem to find anything that's wrong with you. So does this get you curious? You know, what would it be like? You know, if you're starting, you know, if you're somebody that's been struggling with health issues, what would it be like if you start making these daily votes for your true identity, for who you want to be, for who you can be in the world? What would happen if you stop doing some of the things that are making you sick and start doing what would make you well? Another beautiful picture from the desert. And you know, we all want to live longer, or most people want to live longer. But if you're depressed, that may not be very motivating. So it's not just how long you live, but how well you live. You can see that quality of life and depression scores, quality of life increases, depression scores decreases. What we're doing here is that we're closing the gap. You know, we're going from sometimes an addicted self or a conditioned self, and then finding who we really are. So my medical training said that it was easy to take a pill and that people don't change. We found out that that, in fact, is not true. Also, I was taught that fear is a good motivator, maybe temporary, but not long-term. Heart disease, I was taught, was not reversible. I was taught you can't lower cholesterol much with diet and lifestyle, and that you can't lengthen telomeres. And what did we find? That people actually do change. Science has progressed. Lifestyle is more sustainable than pills. Freedom is actually a much better motivator than fear. Heart disease is reversible, that you can lower cholesterol with lifestyle, up to 40% with relatively simple lifestyle changes, and you can lengthen telomeres. So medicine does change, but it changes very slowly. And I like to include this slide because people are always like, well, why can't I get this everywhere, right? You know, there are a lot of financial reasons and a lot of entrenched reasons. And we could spend a whole talk talking about why medicine hasn't changed so much. But this one, I think, captures it fairly well. This is Everett Rogers, who talked about diffusion of innovations back in the 1960s. And he found that there's a few people here that are innovators and early adopters. This was like in the mid-90s when I started working with Dean. And then we started getting more of the early majority in. And now we're getting more of that middle crowd and even some of the late majority. The laggards likely will not ever come around, right? So what we're really shooting for is this, and this is being rolled out all around the nation. And this is Arthur Schopenhauer, who talked about truth passing through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed, right, which is where it was in the 80s and 90s. Second, it's violently opposed. Again, we saw a lot of this. And then it's accepted as being self-evident. Now, when I talk to people that heart disease is reversible, I rarely get much pushback. They may be like, well, not very much, but yeah, but what about the flow? And, you know, but the conversations are very different. Now, I think it's probably also useful for people to know that in the medical system, if people aren't up on it, they're often down on it. So if your doctor's not incredibly supportive of a plant-based diet and some of the other things that you're experimenting with, it's probably because they're not up on it. They just haven't learned about it. And so in medicine in general, if people aren't up on it, they're down on it. The other thing is that where evidence is thin, opinion is thick. And so if they haven't studied the evidence, they might have very strong opinions. Medicine is often paradigm-based rather than evidence-based. And so bring in some of this evidence, help your doctors get smarter. And has medicine caught up? You know, I'm proud to say that medicine is catching up. But if we're waiting for medicine to catch up, you're going to miss out on some really big things that could transform your health. And medicine changes, but it changes very slowly. And we're finding that you can make these changes. We're actually even studying this program now for Alzheimer's. And we're seeing you know, preliminary data that this is reversing early Alzheimer's. People with advanced Alzheimer's probably aren't going to show the same benefit, but people with early Alzheimer's are seeing incredible benefits. You know, stay tuned. That data will come out and be published over the next years. But do you really want to wait for medicine to catch up is the question that I ask everyone. Is that something that you're wanting to wait for? You can make these changes now. This is an anti-inflammatory program. And, we've been talking about this as a reversal program. You know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, that you can do much more if you don't yet have a disease just by even simpler lifestyle changes. But when you have a condition, going with a full anti-inflammatory program is really the pound of cure. When you're preventing it, you can do the ounce of prevention. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do all 4 parts all fully, but looking at these 4 parts and deciding how much you can fit into your life and how much you need to have the goals that you want to have as outcomes. And I like to reflect on Michael Pollan's statement here, these 7 words, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And you've probably heard many other presenters talk about this because it summarizes so much about the food. So we talked about the miracle morning flow. We talked about the data of these simple changes to actually reverse many conditions, stabilize many conditions, including heart disease, early prostate cancer, looking at early Alzheimer's, diabetes, obesity, clearly, depression, and now as we're moving into studying about Alzheimer's. So I will leave you with my email, and feel free to email me questions. I also will go off of the screen share and chat in your questions if you have questions, and I'm sure AJ will.
I actually have been writing down. There was actually a couple of questions that were sent in advance when we announced your appearance.
Okay.
And a couple of questions that I wrote down that are in the live chat. And this was fabulous, by the way. I actually took notes. I love what you said. What if you stopped doing what made you sick and started doing what made you well? That's like simple, but it's profound.
Right. And what I've been finding is that simple is the new powerful. And, literally something like, even just doing one part of that miracle morning flow, where you wake up and think about your purpose. People have come back to me and said, I just did one part of your miracle morning flow and my whole life has changed.
Yeah, I'm going to start it tomorrow. This has just been incredible. It's like I right before we ran, I texted my friend Sharon McRae and I said, you have to watch. She goes, why? I go, just trust me. And she's like, oh, I love this doctor. So thank you so much. What you said is, I can think about it when I work with people for weight loss. What if you stopped eating what made you fat and started eating what could make you thin? You could use it that way too.
Right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Again, super powerful.
It's amazing.
It applies.
So Barb, who's watching live, said, what was the difference between the control group and the study group? Was it the diet alone or diet and exercise?
So there's 4 parts to the program. There's diet, exercise, stress management, and group support. So those are the 4 parts. They're equally weighed. So it's not thought that any one part is any better than the others, although, we have many leaders. I do train the trainer type of programs now as we roll it out across the nation. And so our stress management facilitators there, our group support facilitators there, our dietitian is there, and everybody's, and then our stress management specialists. I lost track of, did I mention all 4 of those? But we're always ribbing each other. Our part's the most important, our part's the most important. But they're all equally weighed. And if you look at, actually, if you break them down a little bit in the research, and it wasn't, the studies were not powered to say which one was the most powerful. They were mostly designed to look at, do these combined work. But if you look at which ones made the biggest difference in our small sample size, it was actually the stress management that made the biggest difference in a small sample. What is for you, I like to think about Werner, who was one of the people I mentioned in the slideshow. And he said, people would always come up to him at the retreats and say, what's the most important part of the Ornish program? And he had this really thick German accent, and he would look at them and he'd say, the most important part of the program is that part that is hardest for you to do.
That's hilarious.
and I love it, and I think there's a lot of truth in that.
It's so true that when people come with me with food addictions, what should I give up? The thing that's hardest. That's because that's what's causing the problem.
Right. And when you talk about food addictions, just a little bit of a side note here. You may or may not know this, but people that have food addictions, there's a chronic irritation that happens when you eat that food. And that irritation actually releases some of our natural body's ability to combat pain, right? Which is like an opiate. So when people are eating that food, injuring themselves, they get a little bit of an opiate hit. And so it really does become an addiction pattern. And people will often go through withdrawals when they stop that food. Similar, that the sort of cravings and, those sorts of things that people get when they're withdrawing. So yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes those things that we're so wedded to can be really challenging for us to overcome.
Absolutely.
Total compassion for all of us. It's not like I'm immune to this or AJ's immune to this. We all have to, walk the talk and we've learned this in our own way, which is usually the hard way.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see the comments, Dr. Brown, but people are saying outstanding presentation. I wish he was my doctor. And Pat said that you have a very soothing voice. And I agree. Like, do you ever do any meditation tapes? Because your voice is, I found myself mesmerized during this because your voice is very, very soothing.
Well, thank you. I do meditation tapes, yes, and that's part of my wellness program. What I'm in the process of putting together, I've been teaching global wellness for years now, over 10 years, to mostly medical students and residents. And it's been a really nice, what I would call a pressure cooker of teaching, because you have to be able to think about people, some of the busiest people in the world that are undergoing some of the most stressful experiences. In residency, we liken it to starting 16 new jobs in a year. Right. So it is really challenging circumstances. And so, over the years, I've really refined a lot of what I teach so that people can do it quick, that it can be really simple, that even the busiest people can do it. And it's been distilled down into what I call global wellness, which has 3 parts to it. The first part is getting clarity on what's really important to us. The second part is getting momentum, which deals with our vitality and our energy, right? And also deals with productivity. Oftentimes, the biggest barrier that people cite for not being well is they don't have the time, or, other things are stealing my time. And so we really address that head on. And then the third is flow, which is where everyone wants to be. We want to be in flow, right? That's why I call it the miracle morning flow. We want that, not necessarily effortless, but the right amount of challenge in the ways that we want to be challenged, that bring us that sense of purpose and meaning. And so that's the idea behind flow. And so these are the 3 main parts that we will work with. And so that's something that I'm currently putting together. If you're interested in that, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll do it. I'll probably be offering an early discount for people that want to sign up for it now. But that's something I'm currently putting together as I continue to teach the residents and med students. We've expanded to a couple of different med schools now. And so people are really getting an experience in what it's like to be globally well and to learn these habits at an early stage in the life of medicine. I wish I would have had it. I always like to give the gift that I wish I would have received.
Yeah. Linda's saying, why doesn't every doctor know this? And to me, the fact that you mentioned that people are being suspended from heart transplant surgery, that are reversing plaques in 5 weeks, this should be news.
It is news, and actually we get a lot of press. We get a lot of news. These studies come out in the major journals, and a lot of the doctors do know it. But sometimes deep rivers move very slowly. And if one of the cardiologists pulled me aside when I was giving a talk down in Southern Florida, and he was retiring, and he says, I've got nothing to lose by telling you this. And he said, you're not dealing with, people that are thinking about just their patients. They have to think about their families as well, and if you move into this area, your husband or wife is going to want to be in a nice neighborhood here, that costs X amount of money. And if you're in that neighborhood, your kids need to go to private schools, and that's going to cost X amount of money, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you're talking about changing the way that we do medicine, what you're really talking about is them not being able to provide for their families. And it changed the dialogue to me from, God, why doesn't everybody do this, to the fact that we're all sort of entrenched in a system, and that system is tied up in so many things, including our families. And so even people that want to do the right thing often aren't able to for financial reasons. And, you can argue that that's not a good enough reason. I would argue that, okay, that we need to change it. But it also helped me to have a little bit more compassion for some of these, the providers that know the information, but that have not yet gone that extra step to apply it. Now, those that oppose it is a whole nother situation, because there are sometimes people that oppose it. And that's often just paradigm-based medicine. It's not evidence-based medicine. So, that's just not good. That's not good medicine, right? But I can understand why somebody would be, I've got to do the medicine that I've been taught because that's what I was taught, and people are getting benefit from that, and maybe they get more benefit this way than they would then. We get into the psychology of cognitive dissonance and all of those other things that are kind of beyond the scope probably of this little sidetrack.
And I agree with you. And when I used to live in LA, my personal internal medicine doctor was vegan, but he couldn't run the kind of practice you have because, you got 3 kids, and it's just not easy to just, now that you know this, do something different, because like you said, he has to provide for his family, and it's very hard to make that switch sometimes to lifestyle medicine.
That's part of the reason why I've gone to training med students and residents. And one of the reasons I train med students and residents is because these are people that they haven't been inundated with the system fully yet. And so if I can help them learn new lifestyle, evidence is really clear. If people practice these, if let's just say I'm a doctor that practices stress management, I meditate, I'm 10 times more likely to bring up meditation with my patients. If I practice a healthy diet, I'm 3 to 10 times more likely to bring that up with my patient. So if I can help teach young doctors how to take care of themselves, they're going to be better at helping you to take care of yourself. So that's part of the reason why for the last 10 years, I've been really focusing on, med students and residents, so that we can bring up generations of people that will have these skills for themselves, and then they won't fear them when they're teaching them to their patients. I started with myself and with my family. That was my main thing. And, and now I teach an integrative medicine fellowship and, teach integrative medicine for the underserved. We started an organization called I Am For Us, which is integrative medicine for the underserved. And we have a conference, and we're teaching this to people all over the nation every single year. We have an online conference coming up in August, which if you hop onto iamforus.org, you can join our conference if you're in medicine. It's a great place to meet people and to hear about some of the stuff that's happening, we call it bringing integrative medicine from the boutiques to the streets. It's a very powerful way to get people to change their lifestyle being one of the main things of integrative medicine.
That is incredible. Linda, who's watching live, wanted to know if you do any private consults, and Heidi, who's watching live, wants to know, do you need a yoga teacher for your program?
That's great. Send me an email. And I do private consults, and just send me an email and we can set something up. And my email is, again, ben@benbrownmd.com. Super simple, ben@benbrownmd.com.
How do I find the I Am For Us? I'm trying to post the link, but I'm not finding it. What is that website?
I am, and then 4, the number 4, and then us.org.
That's why I couldn't find it. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to post it. I got it. All right. Perfect.
For us. Yeah.
Well, in addition to your soothing voice, Francie Sue says you have very nice, well-groomed hands.
Oh.
Hands.
Hands?
Hands. They like your hands, which I don't know. We haven't had a manicure since like March 6th. So that's actually incredible. So what does it mean that you're the medical director of the lifestyle of the Dean Ornish program? So you oversee, because I think people don't understand that this is a real program that is insurance will pay for the Ornish program in many places. And so we need to let people know this, because people are saying, oh, well, yes, they can take this program.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways that we can take it, and clearly things have changed a lot with COVID. This is a very hands-on, high-touch program, and we're, currently the sites are adjusting the program so that we can do more of it online, that we can do, some of the shared meals has become box meals, all of that. But in terms of how do you find out about the Ornish program, and is there a program in your area, go on to ornish.com. And then there's a thing that says locations, and you can see whether or not there's a location near enough to you to do that program. There are insurance requirements. You have to have had a heart attack or a stent, or have congestive heart failure, there's a few other requirements. But if you've had those and you haven't gone through other cardiac rehab, then you will likely qualify in your area for advanced cardiac rehab. Yeah.
Terrific. Barb says, why is eggs and dairy included? What benefits do they have that plants can't provide?
Yeah, so you do not have to do eggs and dairy. Nobody has to do that, and there's soy on there too, and some people don't tolerate soy. You can modify this diet to whatever type of diet that you want. Part of the reason that eggs and dairy are included, it's actually not eggs, it's egg whites. And egg whites, some people have higher protein needs, and we wanted to give them an option if they have higher protein needs. Some people are more in a catabolic state, and so higher protein needs, but you could still argue that can be gotten from plants as well. And that's a reasonable argument. It gives people a little bit more variety that are wanting that. And you could think of it as a transitional food, or you can think of it as, that this is just making it available to a broader group of people. As far as dairy goes, it's non-fat dairy that is allowed. Again, limited number of servings a day. But again, that's mainly to give people a broader variety of foods. We're talking about people that are coming from the pork belt and some of the other parts of the world. And this gives them a little bit more variety in recipes, but it's not required that somebody does that. You can completely be a vegan. You can be gluten-free. You can be on a FODMAPs diet. You can be on a lot of different diets and make this one work. I think the one that would be really hard to make work would be the paleo. But again, there's a lot of overlap. There's a guy that wrote a book called Vegan Paleo. Tons of overlap in terms of that and this what we do. Just different theories around fats.
Terrific. Yeah. And it is still, even though you allow a very small amount of nuts now, it is still it's still true to the low fat diet.
Yeah, it's 10%, is the fat content. That's for the reversal program. Now for the prevention program, we're more liberal in terms of that. And the prevention program, similar to the Mediterranean diet. I really think that for most people who don't have a health issue or aren't struggling with weight issues, that you can get away with a lot more on a prevention diet than you can if you're trying to either, drop tremendous amount of weight or reverse something like diabetes or heart disease. Remember the ounce of prevention and the pound of cure. But for people that are trying to reverse a serious medical condition or who are trying to drop dramatic amounts of weight with, it is doable with lifestyle, but you need much more dramatic lifestyle changes. And that's why we did this, was that, the American Heart Association had put out something that wasn't helpful because it didn't reverse the condition that they're trying to reverse, because they didn't go far enough. And, we went far enough and we got results. It's, both undeniable and not surprising. And, the question always comes, well, what if you go further? We're a very science-based organization. I have an eyelash in my eye, so I'm blinking a fair amount. So my apologies on that one. But if you go further, might you get more results? I know that some of the places, you're very familiar with True North. True North goes very far with the nutrition element. They go a little bit further, I think, even than we do, with the salt and the sugar. They've shown some amazing stuff around reversing even autoimmune conditions. And we've reversed a number of autoimmune conditions as well. We had one woman in our program, these are anecdotes. We haven't done research on this, but we've had several patients that have reversed kidney disease, right? Early kidney disease and even late stage up to stage 4 kidney disease, because it's an anti-inflammatory program. The thing that we add that I think is different than a lot of the programs are just purely nutrition is that we add the stress management. Hugely, hugely important. We add the exercise, again, really, really important. And we add the group support. And in the group support, it can be sometimes the most healing part of the program, whether or not it's the most curing or reversing part of the program. But I've had people that said, I haven't talked to my son in 20 years, and I just had my first good conversation with him. That's going to do something to our physiology. You just know it. I mean, I say it and I feel my physiology change. So these are, powerful things. And what they're learning is how to listen without judgment. what they're learning is how to speak without judgment, and how to authentically speak their emotions, which a lot of people never learned. Right? These are not that difficult things, but if you never learned it, you never learned it. And so our support groups are some of the most healing experiences that I've been a part of in my medical career.
Yeah, well, it must be so rewarding to have your job.
It is. I balance all of my work. You probably know this, AJ. I've done a lot of international work, and so I go to Thailand and Burma, and do a lot of work with the Burmese refugees along the Thai-Burma border, and a lot of my work is with the underserved as well. And just want to make sure that people have access to good medicine wherever they are.
Well, thank you for the work you do.
Well, likewise, thank you for the work you do.
Yeah.
And thanks to all your listeners.
Just one more question if you have time, because
please.
She did send it in, and it's specifically about the reversal program. But I do want to say I agree with you, even though I choose to eat a no added fat diet. I agree that people that don't struggle with weight or don't have heart disease, they can eat a lot more fat. But would you agree it's best to get it from whole food sources like nuts, seeds, and avocado rather than refined oils?
Yeah, so this is a really important point, and one that you have to dive deep to get answers to. Like, why are fats bad for us? Okay, and you'll hear more about the omega-6, the omega-3, and the omega-9, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated fats. That you'll find out some, and you'll find in some of these studies there are widely different things around all of those. And what I think a lot of it comes down to, and again, this is me putting together a lot of the science, is oxidized fats. And so you're talking about fats in their whole source, they're much less likely to oxidize. But when you refine fats, when you refine oils, particularly the polyunsaturated oils, they're very susceptible to breakdown by oxygen. They get oxygenated, and a good fat becomes a bad fat. So that if you're eating the food, or if you're pressing the fat yourself, and you're eating it or using it right away before it gets oxidized, that's a very different situation than if you have olive oil or corn oil or something that's been sitting on your shelves out of your refrigerator for 6 months, and then you cook something in it. So in that sense, some of the fats that are more stable, more heat stable, might actually be better for us if we're using them in that way, or less bad for us, I should probably say. And whole food sources of fats, again, because they are less likely to be oxidized. And then omega-3 fats oxidize much quicker. So if you smell old walnuts, they smell lousy, they smell rancid. If you smell a fat and it smells rancid, I wouldn't eat it. I wouldn't go out of my way. If it's your only food that you have, or it's going to add a little bit of flavor that you really love, eat small quantities of it. Or if you're on a reversal program, just don't eat it at all. So the whole idea of oxidized fats is what I would say will be likely one of the next frontiers in nutrition.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this, it's funny when you said the word less bad, in my head, I went to Dr. Alan Goldhammer, because one of his sayings is, just because something is less bad doesn't mean it's good.
I like it. Yeah.
I know you never connect, even though you're both in Santa Rosa.
No, we actually do. We go over to True North. Usually, because I run a fellowship, we do a number of field trips with our fellow. So we've gone over to True North several times. So one of our fellows actually went and worked at True North. Anthony Lim was in our residency program. So Anthony was one of my residents, and he worked at True North and now works with McDougall. And so I visit with John and go over and speak with the folks at True North periodically. We're all it's a pretty tight family.
It's just not fair that all the great doctors all ended up in Santa Rosa. One of you could maybe move to somewhere else. So I know I want to respect your time, but one last question, Dr. Brown, from Kit. She says, does the Ornish program recommend an optimal level of homocysteine, especially for those with high lipoprotein A? And what type of dosage of B12 do you recommend to keep the homocysteine at the optimal level?
It's a great question, and there's several questions in there. So the first question is one on lipoprotein A, and that's an area of interest of mine. We've had several people come through the program, and they do very well in the program if they've got lipoprotein A. And for those that don't know, lipoprotein A, it's also known as Lp(a), is like a cholesterol molecule that has an extra sticky branch on it. So if you picture, sort of normal cholesterol, and you put a little sticky branch on it, which happens if they get oxidized or if they get acylated or glycosylated, they get more sticky. But Lp(a), even if they aren't those things, is more sticky. So they become more what's called atherogenic. They are more likely to create plaques. And so when you have that situation, if you don't do something about it, even with normal cholesterol levels, you might have a very strong family history of heart disease and your cholesterol levels are normal. So I would get your Lp(a) checked if you're, people under 50 have had heart disease in your family, and that's a common thing. And you get your cholesterol checked and they say it's fine. You probably have Lp(a). Chances are very good. So, so that's one. It does come down with N-acetylcysteine. It also comes down with niacin. And there's another one that I think is berberine. I'm pretty sure berberine also leads to decreasing Lp(a). So those are three things that you can look into as far as decreasing Lp(a). Now, the other question you asked is homocysteine. And homocysteine is related to B12 and related to a process that's called methylation. Now, there's a lot of people that have challenges with methylation. It's a very common place to have what are called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, which is basically just a small genetic error. But there's so much redundancy built into that system because methylation is so critical to cellular repair that even if you have one of those, you're still going to make it through. You'll just limp along. You won't be as efficient. And you might have either a high homocysteine or a high what's called methylmalonic acid, MMA. So if you're in that condition, then many people are taking methylated folate, methylated B12. There's a few other things that they'll take that will bring those levels down. What's not known so well is if you bring those levels down, if that has a long-term effect on the health. The thought is that it probably has some effect. There have been a few studies that have shown that it does, some studies that show that it doesn't. And so it's a little bit of an area of where we need more evidence, is what I would say. I don't think it's an area of controversy, but it's an area where we're still waiting for the, okay, solid science, I can fully say this. And some people would say we're there now, okay? And other people would say, well, I need a little bit more information. And I'm in that, I need a little bit more studies. But other people would say, hey, we're totally there now. And if I was in that situation, I wouldn't wait for the studies. I'd do it. I'd bring my homocysteine down. We do not address that so much. We do address the B12 issue, and we address that by taking a multivitamin and a multivitamin with B12 in it. We recommend, and there are other supplements that I think are important depending on what you're dealing with and what your nutrition background is. But that's, we recommend just simply a multivitamin. And we also do recommend omega-3 fats for people that are on our program, just again, to get that further anti-inflammatory effect and also to stabilize cell membranes.
Wow, this is
lots of info.
Fabulous.
I hope I didn't speak too fast.
No, not at all. Is the Ornish program only in the United States?
Currently, although Dean has spent time in England, and they're looking at bringing it to England as well. Lots of people all around the world have read the books or put together their own parts of the program. It's harder to do, but many people have been successful in putting together the program for themselves. The hardest part is the stress management and the group support, because people fool themselves and think they're doing it. I mean, the nutrition part is pretty standard, right? If you're following the advice that you're recommending for your folks, they're doing the nutrition already. Exercise, it's standard recommendations. But the stress management, although it's getting more standard, with all of the apps, we're recommending an hour a day. So somebody could do that relatively easy. And, getting support is a little bit easier now too, than it was, back in the 80s or 90s. So if you have a built-in support system, but learning how to speak from the emotions and learning how to listen are the two things that we really teach well.
Right. Well, this has been just incredible. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. And I know you're writing a book, so when it comes out, I would love to have you on again so that we can talk about
Excellent.
that.
Yeah, look forward to that, AJ.
All right.
Always good to see you.
Thank you so much. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back at 1 p.m. today when I'll be doing a Q&A with Dr. Scott Stoll. Thanks again, Dr. Brown. It was so great catching up with you.
Likewise, AJ. You take good care.